Hey, what's up, comrades? We're here to talk about another X-Men book, and one book this time. This is the first kind of like standalone graphic novel that really covers down, like it's like a tight individual story. I don't think I've had any of these before. A lot of times you have these giant size X-Men or whatever else, but I don't think they've had like a graphic novel that is like completely unrelated to anything else. There's a few. This one is God Loves Man Kills, which is excellent. And I think it was the first one. I'm trying to recall, because there's like the New Mutants, Bentley's writing the New Mutants. But this is like, it's like its own story that has ramifications for like the world. But you don't need to like you could just pick this up, and it pretty much like here's like a very powerful story about like adult subjects, and then like moving on with your day. There's also what is it called? Cry Havoc. And there's another one that's kind of like this that deals with like the Holocaust, if I remember correctly. There's a few, but these are excellent. And they're under the Marvel graphic novel brand instead of like the X-Men brand or whatnot. So this is number 5 of that. And I think the New Mutants might have been number 4, but it's really like closely tied into like the X-Men. Well, this is kind of like a story of the X-Men that could almost just not exist at all. Okay, so we start off, and there's 2 young children, and the one's 11 and one's 9, and they're trying to escape from something. And then it's like an older brother and younger sister, and the brother gets like shot. He's bent over. They're talking about their parents being killed. There's like this crazy woman, and she identifies herself as the Purifiers. And then the boy starts to like charge up some sort of power, and they shoot him in the head and kill him. Right? Very intense. And then the little girl has like blood all over her hand, and she's like, what are you gonna do? And they shoot her and kill her too. And then they hang him up. They pretty much lynch him, put muties on their chest at this like school playground, and leave. And that's when Magneto comes in, and he's like, motherfuckers. And so he like essentially like gets the children off the swing set that they're being lynched on, pretty much, and then buries them. At this point, we head over to New York City, and we find out about the Stryker Crusade. So Stryker is Reverend what's his first fucking name? William, I think it's William. So Reverend William Stryker, he is an asshole, to say the least. And he's got this whole thing where he's like against mutants. Mutants are the devil. They're devil spawn. All this stuff. He's watching a video that's describing all the X-Men, right? And again, this is like, you don't need any prior information. In fact, when we get introduced to Kitty Pryde, she's called Ariel, which she has not been called Ariel since like the very beginning of her being introduced. Like she's almost never good. It's always Shadowcat or Kitty or whatever. Anyway, so there's Cyclops, Storm, Wolverine, Colossus, Ariel, who's not Kitty Pryde, and Nightcrawler. So we're gonna do all their powers. He's watching them. The secretary comes in, talks to him about what's going on and about the X-Men and whatnot, and then the book actually officially begins. Starts at chapter 1, and Kitty is fighting some kid, and they like burst out of this door, and it almost looks like they break through the door completely, and they're punching each other and fighting. And then Ileana's trying to pull Kitty off this boy, and then Peter rolls up and stops them from fighting. And Kitty very predominantly has her Star David, which is important. And then so once Peter kind of gets them like calmed off, and then Kitty's about to phase, and Ileana's like, stop it. And then Nikki Hunter, wait, is that her name? Danny, sorry. No, Danny's the boy. I can't remember. Stevie. Thanks. I'm sorry. So Stevie Hunter, who's our ballet teacher. So clearly they've been at ballet. This guy is a part of the ballet group or whatever. He identifies that him and his family are part of the Stryker Crusade. And Kitty, the reason she flipped out is because he's bad-mouthing mutants, talking about mutant kind or whatever. And then finally this kid like gets out of there because Peter's like, hey man, you better get the fuck out of here before I beat your ass. And then Stevie's like, hey, you need to calm down, and like there's better ways to do this and handle this. And then Kitty literally is like, what? How would you act if they called you like I'm not going to say this in this video because I want to put this on YouTube, but Stevie is black, and Kitty tells her, like, how would you feel if they called you a blank hunter? How would you feel then? That's what it's like to be called a mutie lover. And then she like storms off, and Stevie's like, she's right. And she cries about it, and she's really angry about the whole situation. We then find out that Stevie's being watched by these like sketchy dudes, obviously from the Stryker Crusade. And they talk about killing her because she's a mutant lover too, but they're like, no, we'll deal with them later. We got to get the mutants first. We then go back to the mansion where Wolverine asks, Kitty has like a black eye, and Wolverine's like, did you get him? Better than got you? And she's like, no, I lost. And then she like leaves, and Wolverine's like, well, get him better next time, girl. And then they start watching this Nightline performance, right? Everyone's kind of hung out seeing it. And this episode or issue or whatever it is it's a debate between Professor X and Stryker about mutants and whatever, and then they're really cutting it up so that Professor X doesn't look as good as Stryker. Also, Stryker's much better at talking in public, according to like what everyone's talking about. So they go back and forth about that. At the end, they're like, "This is stupid. I'm super pissed. Let's go to the danger room." So Ariel, Colossus, Nightcrawler, and Wolverine go and like get some energy out of in the danger room. Ileana like sets it up. Meanwhile, over at Nightline, Cyclops and Aurora are standing there like watching, and they're talking about how like that was a huge loss. Like hopefully it doesn't get too crazy, but Stryker's much better at public appearance. And then the girl who killed the children before, she bumps into Cyclops and then talks to Stryker about following them and taking care of business. Back over at the danger room, they're having some struggles, but then they like are able to like team up and like use their powers together to accomplish like the mission of like that particular training session. Back over on the streets of New York, Professor X is being driven back home. And he talks about how like Stryker had like some sort of like Psyblock on him along with other people there, and how did he know and how did he get this information? And then the car gets like blasted, and then they get like all shot up. Cyclops, Aurora, and Professor X, and then they like once they shoot them, then this guy shoots like a rocket and blows up the car, and then like the lady is like mission accomplished. Meanwhile, back over at the mission, at the mansion, they're checking out their scores and whatnot, and Wolverine complains that this is not a real mission or whatever, and then Nightcrawler gets a call from the police, and it's like an accident, and Aurora, Scott, and Professor X are all dead. So then like chapter 2, the next day, Kitty's like mourning in the woods and being really sad and kind of like an asshole, and Ileana's just trying to be a good friend, and she's like, hey, stop, they're my friends too, stop being such a bitch. And like, yeah, you're right, and they hug it out, and they have like a little chat about everything that's going on, and they find this like crazy electronic sensor module. So Kitty destroys it, and because when she phases through electronics, they get destroyed when it's like plot convenient, because sometimes it doesn't happen. But then her and Ileana like hide and wait to see what happens. Meanwhile, over at Central Park, Colossus and Wolverine are investigating the crash, and Wolverine's like, they're not dead. And he's like, what? And he's like, I've set up a lot of like fucking things like this. Trust me, I was Canadian Special Forces, but like their scent is not here. Kurt is watching the Rolls Royce they drove up in, and he sees that people they pulled up, they went and checked inside the car, and then they like rolled back in, and Wolverine's like, all right, let's execute this. So then they attack the car. It tries to drive off, but they beat the shit out of everybody, pull them out. And then these like purifiers show up, and they're wearing these like big armored things or whatnot, and they blast Colossus from behind. But then guess who shows up? That's right, Magneto, and he nabs him up real good. And Wolverine's like, the fuck? And he's like, I'm here as a friend and an ally. And then we switch back over to upstate, where Ileana and Katya, or not Katya, it is Katya, Kitty Pryde, or Ariel, are watching some goons come over and like fix the device. And so I don't know what their plan was, because Kitty she's like, all right, I'm going to phase down to the ground. So she does, but then they spot Ileana and they grab her and they shoot her with like a stun bullet. And then Kitty like follows and hops into the trunk. They then have some sort of Cerebro device, and they're like, oh, there's a mutant in the trunk. It's Kitty Pryde. So they gas her, and it's like, ruh-roh, they're all going back. Somewhere else, I don't think it's the mansion. One set of players exit Savior. Oh, no. Yeah, so the Colossus, Wolverine, Nightcrawler, and Magneto bring the 4 people they captured back, and then Wolverine's about to kill one of them, and then Magneto's like, I have a better way to do that. And then Wolverine's like, oh, your lucky day, pal. And Magneto's like, I doubt that. It's so badass. And then he tortures them for information. And Colossus is like, I don't know if I really feel good about this. And Wolverine's like, well, got the job done. Then chapter 3, we get this crazy like reds, like everything's red. All the X-Men look monsters. Look like they're crucifying Professor X. It's like this crazy scene, whatever. And we find out that Stryker and some doctor, does it say his name? Phillips something. They're trying to break Professor X so that he'll work for Stryker by, they're trying to like use drugs and sensory deprivation, and they've been like torturing him for like 15 hours. And they got Scott and Aurora in like these chambers where they're torturing them, and then like their psychic connection to Professor X is causing them to have all these nightmares and stuff. And then they look at Cyclops, and he's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why are you doing this? And he's like, because you exist. And he gets like this stupid story. Like, he's a real asshole. He's like a master sergeant in the army. With the Army Rangers. And then his wife got pregnant, and then one day they were driving and then like his car rolled over or whatever, and then his wife had like an emergency birth, and the child that was born was a mutant. It was a monster. So he killed that, and then he killed his wife, and then he like put them in the car and set it on fire and blew. And he was gonna blow himself up too. He blew everyone up, but he somehow survived. And then he had a lot of PTSD, obviously, because he tried to kill. Well, he killed his wife and son, and almost killed himself. And then eventually he like found Jesus. Jesus told him to hunt all the muties. Like what an asshole. Stop using Christianity like to do your own petulant bullshit. Anyway, and the Cyclops is like, you're an asshole. But how'd you get all this information? And he's like, oh, I have a guy on the inside. You know, Fred Duncan. You guys remember Fred Duncan? I barely remember Fred Duncan, and I've been reading X-Men comics like my whole life. Fred Duncan is the FBI guy who works with the X-Men. He's got a whole like portfolio and stuff. And there's a guy who works for Fred Duncan who is a member of the Striker Crusade, so he got all the information, so we know everything about everything. So, no, that makes sense. Smart. All right, so then Stryker gets a call about Illyana and Kitty, and he's like, kill Kitty, and then Storm like freaks out, so they shut her back up in her little chamber, but that doesn't stop like a lightning storm from occurring. At that point, we head back outside of like where the car was transporting Illyana and Kitty, and Illyana gets taken out, and then they just like shoot the shit out of the car to kill Kitty, and they open the trunk, and then the lady who's the child killer, who's trying to kill more children, because she's a real asshole as well. Let's see, what does she do? Oh, she opens the trunk. She's not there, and then she's like, let's find her. And so Kitty's trying to run away, and then she runs into this like, I don't even know what to call this, like a gang. Like one guy's got like a chic turban, one guy's got a cowboy hat. It's almost like the Warriors, if you will. There's like a Chinaman, because he's got like one guy's got an afro. The Chinaman's got like a straw hat or whatever. Anyway, so they grab her so she can't run away, and then the child killer comes up, and they like. One of the guys like throws a knife at her, and then she shoots them, and they get to like a shootout, and then she somehow survives like these 6 guys who are all obviously like veterans of like wars, which is the most bullshit part about this whole comic, but like whatever. Anyway, she's able to like steal some money, make a phone call to the mansion, and then like the building she's in like explodes, and the purifiers are chasing her down, and she's running. She gets to like a train car, and then they crash in there, and they shoot a police officer, and they're like, we're gonna kill you. And Kitty's like holding the police officer, and she's like, I guess I gotta die because I'm not gonna let this guy get killed for me. And then all of a sudden the whole thing turns dark, and it's Magneto. He's grabbed up the train car, and he's like, motherfuckers, and he like destroys all their guns, and the X-Men show up and beat the shit out of all of them. And then Magneto pulls the bullet out of the cop, and then he creates like a literal flying carpet out of metal so they can fly him to the hospital. Meanwhile, back at Stryker's thingamabobber compound or whatever it is, he finally like wins over Professor X mostly, and then he tells him to kill Storm and Cyclops, which he like quote unquote does, not really. Anyway, so then the doctor Philip Ramsey, there we go, there's his last name. He gets assaulted by Ariel, and then the rest of the X-Men, they grab him up, and then Nightcrawler essentially tortures him by being a demon. So they get a bunch of information about that. Back over at the Stryker compound, they throw Cyclops and Storm into like a gurney to send them to the incinerator. And then they're bringing up Illyana, and they're like, what about her? And it's like, throw her in their incinerator as well. So then they get in the elevator along with like the child killer. And then all of a sudden the elevator's going up, and it's like, uh-oh. And so then the child killer like leaps out to like a building, and she's like, oh, they're going to regret that. They're going to regret not taking me more seriously. And they don't. But don't worry about it. So they finally, the X-Men get the elevator, and they rescue Cyclops and Storm, who Professor X didn't kill them. He put them into like a state of like suspended animation essentially, and all they need is a little shocky shock to wake up, and apparently Magneto can do that, so he shocks them real good, and they wake up and they're like, oh fuck. Then they have a conversation about everything, and about living under a dictatorship, and about Magneto's plans to like help the mutants and like make sure everyone's safe and well, and like humans can eat a dick, which is fair, and all this stuff. And they have a pretty good conversation about all that. And then we go into Chapter 4. In Chapter 4, Stryker is going to do some big presentation where he's going to like use Professor X to kill the mutants in the area, and he's going to cause a lot of problems for everybody. And he has this big like tele-evangelist thing, and there's a couple like senators or people in like government or whatever that are like watching, and they're talking about the president. And the president's like, he's willing to hear him out, but this guy's going to be a crazy nutcase. And then we get like different perspectives. Mostly here we get like there's a big crowd of people who support him, and then there's a lot of like the regular people, like the police officers and the politicians who are like, this guy's a fucking asshole. And then they activate the like psi amplifier or whatever, like with the Zerg and StarCraft, and all the mutants are like, oh, my head, and then there's just this boy who's just like walking down the street, and he's like, oh, Jesus Christ, and he's like about to die, and then Nightcrawler rolls up to grab him and take him away so he doesn't die, right? Because he's too close to this thing, and then someone's like, oh, your ears are bleeding, Nightcrawler. Yeah, I must have gotten too close. But guess who doesn't give a fuck about getting too close? That's right, Magneto. So Magneto crawls in to like this dome or Madison Square Garden or whatever it's supposed to be, and he's like, Stryker! And then they do like, and then the government guy's like, oh no, Magneto's attacking. He's like, no, if he was attacking, he would have pulled the whole roof off. He just like opened it up a little bit and came on inside. So let's see where this goes. Stryker then orders like a concentrated psi attack from Professor X onto Magneto, who gets blasted down and then into the crowd. The crowd's about to come get him, but then the police officers do the right thing, and they're about to beat they hold them back, right? And then the guy who's like hanging out with the senator, he's like, Senator, are you okay? And he's like, oh, I got a headache. So he's obviously mutant. And then the whole time, Stryker's just saying a lot of bullshit and being a total asshole. And the rest of the X-Men like get enough courage to just like power through the psi battle, and they're like, all right, we got to take care of this. So they run in, and then the child killer comes running up to Warren. Like, I don't know what she was doing this whole fucking time, but she finally runs up to Stryker. And she's like, oh, my head. And then he's like, oh, you're a dirty mutant. And she's like, no, I believe. I'm a true believer. I'm a true daughter of heaven, please. And he's like, fuck you. And he like throws her off this like thing and like breaks her neck, which is kind of funny. Not that she died or that he did this or anything, but later on they're talking about how he's like he's in court for like all this terrible shit he did, and they're like, oh, he'll probably get off. And I'm like, he literally killed a woman, like on camera, live. Like, how would he possibly get off from that? He's a murderer. Like, the fuck. Anyway, so Magneto finally like gets his shit together while the police officers are protecting him, and then there's like a huge explosion, and that explosion is coming from Professor X, who's trying to defend himself from the X-Men. And so the plan they come up with is that Cyclops is going to do one of his like funny like bounce off the ruby quartz thing from like 15 different screens or whatever, because it reflects off glass, while Nightcrawler and Wolverine try to attack him from two different sides, and then Professor X like subconsciously protects himself from Wolverine's attack, but he's not able to protect himself from Cyclops' attack because he's so concerned about Wolverine. And then Cyclops does this awesome like roundhouse blast. It just blows the shit out of the machine. And then they're like, all right, let's go talk to this guy and figure out what's going on. And so they all walk up to the stage, and he's like, oh, fuck you. And then Cyclops gives like his speech about like, you know, killing people like the Nazis and whatnot. And then him and Stryker go back and forth. And then Ariel is like, more human than you, and something. And then he pulls out a gun and is about to shoot Ariel in the head, and then he gets shot in the arm. And he drops the gun, and there's a police officer who's like fucking trying to kill another child. This child killer, man, he's going to murder two people like live on TV, like the fuck. And then people start freaking out, and then the police chief's like, you all better fucking calm down and get the fuck out of here before you're in trouble. And so then we hit the epilogue. It's a few days later. They're watching a news report. His group is still doing stuff, right? The Crusade's still going. And then Magneto's like, we got to take care of this. And Professor X is about to be like, yeah, I agree, we should join forces. And then Cyclops gives like an impassioned speech about being different and about finding compromise, whatever. And Professor X is like, I'm sorry, Magneto, I can't. And Magneto's like, you're all fools. And Wolverine's like, the world's got no shortage of windmills to tilt that. Which, for those of you who don't know, it's a Don Quixote reference, which is hilarious because like 2 days ago, my wife made a Don Quixote reference while we were driving to like the beach, and I was like, "That's out of nowhere." And she's like, "No, it's very relevant." And she like told me this crazy story about her friend, which is it was very relevant. But now it's like then I read this comic like a couple days later, and I'm like, "Oh, that's funny." And then so they chit chat for a bit, and I was like, "Well, good luck with all your bullshit. Well, when it doesn't work, it'll be my turn." Dun dun dun. And then they chat, and Professor X apologizes for giving up on the dream, and he's so proud that he got these guys to believe in the dream. And then Cyclops and Aurora like hug it out, but it's like they're always like totally platonic good friends, so they're just friend hugging it out, which is super sweet and nice. And that wraps up the issue. Fucking awesome. Yeah, so that's the legendary God Loves, Man Kills. It's just as good as everyone says it is. It's a nice deep piece into like prejudice and got a lot of symbolism and all that good stuff, and it's a good read, and it's a fun little thought process when it comes to, and it's nice seeing Magneto work with the X-Men, which is something that comes up more later, and it's like a nice evolution to like, we completely disagree, but like, you know, there's nuances and we're human, and like sometimes you can work with your enemy if you both have like the same goal here, right? It's like we don't all need to be like fucking crazy online warriors to have these like crusades online or whatever bullshit and whatnot. So excellent issue and thoroughly enjoyed that. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later. Bye.